Hello all, welcome to part 9 of the Security Tube Metasploit Framework Expert course and certification. In this video, we will continue with our excursions into post-exploitation and look at token stealing with the incognito extension in Meterpreter. So this video is part of the SMFE courseware. If you're interested in looking at our SMFE certification, please visit securitytube.net/SMFE for more details. Our certifications is currently taken by students from over 30 plus countries around the world. And this video has been provided free of charge to the community as part of SecurityTube's vision mission to provide free yet quality InfoSec educational material for everyone. Okay, so we are still in the various phases of post-exploitation, and now let's try and look at a couple of other interesting things we can do. So there is an additional extension called Incognito, which is extremely powerful and allows you to do things like token stealing and manipulation and all of that. So before we get into it, let's understand a little bit about what tokens are and how they can help us during a penetration test. So in Windows, every user is identified by a unique identifier called SID or security identifier. The SID is typically of the form S-revision level, which is currently 1 all the time. Then you have the identified authority value, which is whether it's local or domain level. And then you have a domain or local ID and then a relative ID. The fact is this is supposed to be unique on your local machine as well as for your entire domain. Now, basically, how do tokens work? So when a user logs on to a machine by entering his username and password as the logon screen, various processes are created on his behalf like explorer.exe. Now these processes get what is called the primary token of the user, which contains details such as the SID, which uniquely identifies the user on the system, the different groups the user belongs to, as well as different privileges and permissions which are allowed to the given user. Now, if the user process creates multiple threads, all of them inherit the same primary token, right? So the whole idea is the system wants an easy and flexible way to go ahead and pass down permission sets based on the different privilege and authorization levels of the user. Now, where is this used? So typically if any of the user created processes or threads within want to access a restricted resource which requires privileges, then the privileges assigned to the primary token are compared with the privileges required to access that restricted resource. If the privilege level in the primary tokens has what is required to access the object, then access is granted, else access is denied. Now, there is another interesting concept called impersonation tokens. Well, the whole idea is when you basically have things like FTP servers where multiple users log in, you would ideally want that all of those users should individually be able to access their files, create directories and all of that, right? However, as you can imagine, the FTP server process itself may not have the highest privilege available on the system to allow for all of this. So this is what happens. User 1 logs on to the FTP server and basically an impersonation token is assigned to the thread in the FTP server process which is servicing user 1. So what happens is the FTP server process either creates a new thread or goes ahead and uses the user credentials to get an impersonation token for user 1. Now, using that impersonation token, the FTP server process thread can access any resource or do any operation which user 1 is allowed to do on the system. Similarly, when user 2 or user 3 logs on, the threads which are used to service them get impersonation tokens for those users, and thus it is possible for the same server process to service multiple users with different impersonation tokens used in each case. So there are different levels of impersonation tokens. The plain vanilla one allows the server to act on behalf of the client, but only on the local machine, right? And this typically happens for non-interactive logins such as FTP. The second kind of token is called delegation tokens, which are much more powerful and can be applied network-wide or domain-wide. This typically happens when you use interactive logins to log on to terminal services. Okay, so now coming in, what are the attacks possible on impersonation tokens? So we can have both local as well as domain privilege level escalation attacks. This is how a local privilege escalation would work. So let's assume there is a server process which is running and which has created a thread to process the admin user, right? Let's say this is a MySQL server which is running, and the domain admin wants to assign some permissions or create something on that database. So he logs on using his domain credentials, and then an impersonation token is created for the administrator. Now imagine what would happen at this time if a hacker breaks in using some exploit and has access to the server process. The hacker could steal the impersonation token of the admin and then use it locally to do higher privilege operations, right? Simply because the impersonation token is present in the memory of the server process, which itself is a low privilege process. In the case of domain privilege escalation, after the hacker steals the impersonation token with delegation capability, he uses that to basically do operations on other machines which are part of the same domain on which the admin has power to do different operations, right? Okay, so let's look at how using incognito you can do things like token stealing in a Windows-based system. So I have my Windows box once again, and I also have Backtrack running Metasploit. Let me exploit and break into the remote system first. There you go. Now by default only STD API, and depending on the privileges we have, the priv extension is loaded. To load the incognito extension, basically you need to type in load incognito. So it says success, and now you would actually get commands which the incognito extension supports. Now the first thing you would like to do is list tokens you have access to under the current user context. So who is the current user? Well, if your system, it's all powerful, which means you practically have access to all the tokens available on the remote system. So let me look at all the tokens available by user ID. So here it is, you have delegation tokens and even impersonation tokens available with you. Now, if you would like to basically impersonate a token, you need to use the impersonate token command. So let me run list tokens again, and then impersonate token would require you to specify the token, which let's say I'm going to go ahead and steal the token for this user. Before that, let me actually show you what happens. So right now I'm still system, and if I actually do a quick hit on username, clearly shows that I am the system user. Now, after I impersonate this user on the remote system by using this delegation token, right? First is if I do a get UID now, you would notice I am security tube on the remote system. Now if you start any process on the remote system, this would typically inherit the token for the security tube user. So now if I actually do an echo on the username variable, you notice I am security tube rather than system, right? And this is how now in the context of the security tube user, I may be able to do various operations like changing files and all of that as that user. Not to mention the ability to do further delegation through the network and break in through other computers. Now, if you want to get back to your original token posture, which is your system, you need to use the rev to self command, which is revert to self. And now you would again have the same token, which is system authority, right? So Incognito has a couple of other options as well, which is basically adding users to groups, to the local system, etc. with all the token permission sets and everything which you have. I leave this as an exercise, and probably we will have a lab based on this at a later stage, right? So one of the other ways in which you can play with tokens is also with the STD API system commands. The one here is steal token and drop token. Now, steal token works in a slightly different way. What it allows you to do is steal tokens from processes. So if you just type in steal token, it will actually prompt you for the process ID. So what you can do is hit a quick PS, and right now we have system. So let's try and get the token for the security tube user by probably going ahead and using the woccult.exe file, so which is 2432 is the PID. So I'm going to do steal token 2432, and now if you notice, we are basically security tube, right? And if you notice, we did not migrate to the other process in order to do this, right? That's a key point. Now, if you want to go ahead and basically relinquish this, you could just do a quick drop token and you're back to who you are, or you could just do a rev to self, which will bring you back to who you started as, right? Now, this is how you can actually break into a system, steal tokens, impersonate users on the system, and even try, and which you will do in scenario-based hacking later, how to break into other remote systems in the domain with these stolen tokens, right? So that's all for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Please leave your comment behind and see you in the next video. This video is part of the SMFE program. Have a look at securitytube.net/SMFE for more details. Thank you very much.